pro tips. All right, everybody who's joining us, if you want to in the chat, go ahead and let us know if you are expecting and when you're due, or if you've already got a little baby at home and how old they are. Would love to be able to share that with our panelists so we can get you guys the best information for the age and stage that you're in. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start doing introductions and I'll keep letting everybody in as they come. And of course, if for any reason you have to jump out through the webinar, we will be recording this, and I think Zoom will actually automatically send you a recording, a link if you need to catch up afterwards, because we know how crazy it is for those of you who do have a little baby at home. So all right, Renee is expecting. Oh my gosh, you guys are both due. Good luck with the rest of your pregnancies. All right, so welcome. Today, we're going to do Breastfeeding 101. This event is sponsored by the Boppy company and my company, Tot Squad. My name is Jen Saxton, and I am joined by some amazing lactation experts, Katie and Sharba. And we are going to try to give you the complete overview, you know, what to expect. We're all three breastfeeding mamas ourselves. So we know a thing or two about being in the trenches. We are doing a Boppy giveaway today, and that'll be giving away 5 of their amazing breastfeeding pillows. They're valued at $45 each, and they are not only functional, but they're fashionable, and they will save your arm from getting really tired holding that baby all the time, and hopefully help you get the great positioning that you need to breastfeed without pain. So why don't I pass it first to Katie? Katie is going to tell us a little bit about, wait, actually, I have a feeling I have Sharba first on my slides. I'm like, oop, I have Sharba first. Sorry, Katie, you're next.
That's just fine.
Sharba, tell us a little bit about yourself as a mom and as a lactation professional.
Definitely. So like Jennifer said, I'm Sharba. And I'm a mom. I have 6 children, all of whom I breastfed. And so the youngest right now being 19 months, and he is still nursing and showing no signs of stopping. So we are continuing on with that journey, nursing a toddler. And in terms of nursing a toddler, I've always heard toddlers nurse how they want. And that's very true. I always get a toe up my nose. So that is very true about nursing toddlers. And again, like Jennifer said, I am a certified lactation counselor, and I have a company. It's called Queen Springs, and assisting moms in my community at pregnancy resource centers and things of that nature. And that's just, you know, that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Queen Springs, and I'm in rural Georgia. So shout out to all my Georgia people if we have any in the room this afternoon. And I just look forward to speaking with everybody and helping you guys, answering all your questions.
And Sharba, how old is your oldest?
My oldest is 14. So I have been
for 14 years.
I've been breastfeeding 14 years, literally, because they were still nursing when they were toddlers. Pretty much I nursed from one to the next. So literally I've been nursing for 14 years.
You deserve a gold medal. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Katie, you're next. There you go.
My name is Katie Clark, and I am a certified breastfeeding specialist, and I'm also training to be an IBCLC. I have 3 children, 3 boys that are 9, 6, and 2, and I love them so much. And I have been very involved in the breastfeeding community since about 2015, when I ran into many issues with breastfeeding with my second child. And I was like, there is such a lack of support. So I started a Facebook group, and it kind of grew, and I became super passionate about helping and supporting people that are breastfeeding throughout their entire journey. And I love helping people. I have my website where I share a lot of great information, and my Instagram. I am very active on there, sharing tons of stuff. So I have courses and just a lot of fun, different things, but I'm really passionate about helping moms find a way to make breastfeeding work for them, because it's not one size fits all. And, you know, I love to just help people wherever they're at. And I'm excited to be here tonight and to be able to rub elbows with these 2 other ladies, because I think that this community is amazing. And I'm excited for you to be part of it.
Totally. Well, I feel like the rookie of the bunch because I've only been breastfeeding for 3 years compared to 9 and 14 over here. But I'm a mom. My daughter Charlotte just turned 3, and I've got a 7-month-old Sophie. In fact, I'm at the office right now, but I just finished pumping, so I've got a freezer frozen breast milk right over here that I've got to take home at the end of the day. And my company, Tot Squad, is a tech company that connects new and expecting parents with service providers like the beautiful women that you see here today. So if you are looking for support with sleep, with feeding your baby, with nursing, with how to install your car seat correctly, you can go to totsquad.com and find those resources and get connected with virtual and in-person service providers that are close to you. And again, our sponsor tonight is Boppy. They make amazing products for new moms, and they host these webinars as part of their Mom Kind project, which is kind of their corporate social responsibility initiative, helping bring education and resources to expecting and new parents. So thank you so much, Boppy. And if you have not entered for the giveaway yet, that will close at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. I mean, 6, 9, because it's already past that. At the end of this webinar is when the deadline is to enter. So I did my intro already. Oops, I'm somehow going the wrong direction. Okay, there we go. So we're going to start with Sharva's going to go over some of the basics of breastfeeding. And, you know, if you have questions, feel free to stick them in the chat. And we're going to kind of start from pregnancy and then go a bit chronologically through the breastfeeding experience and what you can expect. All right, Sharva, off to you.
All right, guys. So I'm going to talk to you guys. And again, like Jennifer said, if you guys have any questions, of course, go ahead and put those in the chat and we will get to those. And so we're going to talk about birth and lactation. So when do you start making milk? Does anybody have a guess about when you start making milk? Anybody want to put that in the chat? Any guesses?
I
think I know the answer, but I'm not totally sure, but it's sometime while you're pregnant.
Sometime while you're pregnant, you're right. So it's about 16 weeks pregnant. And then when you deliver the placenta, and that has progesterone, progesterone, the hormone to suppress milk secretion. Then you'll see these little drops of colostrum, and it's maybe alarming at first. Let me say that. It may be alarming at first. You may be like, wait, what is this? What's going on? What is this? My shirt may be wet. Now, it may not be enough to, to soak your shirt, but you may see these little drops of colostrum, and it can be clear to bright orange in color. And that actually varies per person. I mean, you may hear about a mom, or you may see a friend of yours, who may be breastfeeding, and you see, like I said, it could be clear, and you may think, is this water coming from my body? Is it too early for me to even be making milk? And I will say, with my other babies, it seemed like, for example, my youngest, I started leaking, and that pain, it started a little earlier. Like I started feeling that milk coming in a little earlier. It seemed like every time.
While you were still pregnant?
While I was still pregnant.
Oh, wow. I didn't have any of that.
It had a rest, really. So I think that just was kind of, one of those things. And so milk transitions around day 5, usually yellow or white. And I want to say, guys, colostrum is milk. Like, I know a lot of times you hear people say, when will my milk come in? That is full of incredible nutrients for your baby. That colostrum is very important for your baby. So that is something that you definitely want to, again, that's your milk coming in. Like, don't let anybody say, you're just waiting for your milk to come in. You're just waiting for your milk to come in. Colostrum, baby needs colostrum, and that is very important for baby to get.
Well, I think, I've seen people that are concerned they're not making enough in those early days, but there's some great visuals out there of like the size of the baby's stomach on each day after birth. And it's like tiny. They really only need a few drops at a time throughout the day. And that's why you have to feed them so often, is because it's just a very little bit at a time. But yeah, then you'll start to produce more, and their stomach is bigger so they can eat more.
Exactly. And so, just like Jennifer was saying, like, you'd be surprised at how small baby's stomach is in the beginning. You may think, oh, my baby isn't eating enough. My baby didn't really stay latched that long. But in all honesty and in reality, baby just has a tiny stomach. And the first time that I even saw that visual, it was really shocking to me just how little it was. Because I mean, granted, babies are tiny anyway, but when you see that little tiny stomach, it makes more sense when the colostrum and all is coming in, that's enough for them. You know, that's sufficient nutrition for them, but it is.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Then your milk matures around day 14 until about 4 weeks, and you can have a bluish tint to white depending on the fat content. And when I would see that bluish tint that was in the milk for my son, I thought maybe there was something wrong with the bottles. I thought maybe I bought those, like the bottle itself, maybe I've had a tint to it, or maybe even something was wrong with my milk. But that's why I feel like breastfeeding education and things like classes and webinars like these are so important to let you know that, hey, this is normal, you know, like don't dump that milk just because it has this blue tint to it. That is actually normal for you. All right. And let's see, does breast size impact supply? What do you guys think? Do you think that I make more milk? You think that I would make more milk just because of certain things? Or, I mean, what do you guys think?
We gotta vote for no. I mean, I know there's a lot of women who have smaller breasts that are concerned they're not going to be able to make enough milk. So maybe you can address that.
Definitely. So that actually is not true. Like just because someone has larger breasts does not mean they're going to overproduce. Just because someone has smaller breasts doesn't mean that they're not going to produce enough. Okay. So what it is, it's all about the breast capacity. Okay. So I'll give you another example. I'm using myself as an example here. I feel like with all of my children, except my last, I feel like I overproduced. Now with my youngest, again, these are the same breasts. These are the same breasts and they fed all these children. But with my youngest, my production was actually not as great as it was with my other children. So don't fear thinking, you know, hey, will I be able to breastfeed? Is that something that I'll be able to do? I don't think I'll be able to breastfeed. And regardless of what your question is or what your reason is as to say, I'm not sure, or I don't think I'll be able to breastfeed, I always tell moms, speak with a breastfeeding education specialist, speak with a lactation consultant at the hospital, speak to someone who has this breastfeeding knowledge and education to answer the questions that you have and to address those concerns, because you don't have to wonder, you know, you don't have to deal with that fear on your own. They're there for that. We are there for that, you know, to answer those questions that you have. So if you have those type of questions and you're just wondering, I mean, really,
I can give an example. I have like pretty large breasts, but I was really concerned about my nipple size and shape. So I know that there's a lot of women who have flat nipples, short nipples, inverted nipples that are concerned that they're not going to be able to breastfeed. And, you know, I literally, when I was pregnant, I remember I went to like a breastfeeding education class in person because it was before COVID. And I was like in the back room, like whipping out my boob, showing this lady my nipple, saying, do you think I'm going to be able to breastfeed? And she was like, yes, like you're going to be fine. And there's all sorts of different accommodations that can be made if you are having trouble because of the size or shape of your nipples or your breasts. So I would say, don't feel nervous if if you're pregnant and you aren't sure if you're going to be able to breastfeed. And I would also say, and we'll come back to this again later, you know, if for any reason you are not able to breastfeed, like your mental health as a mom is more important. And, you know, we're big believers that fed is best. And we know that like everybody who's here has a great intention to breastfeed, and we want to absolutely support you in that, but like not at the sacrifice of your mental health.
Right.
And so we'll talk a little bit more about mental health later on, because breastfeeding is I think all of us could say, like one of the hardest things that we've ever done. And that's why I said Trevor deserves a gold medal, 14 years, 6 kids. It's a hard thing, but you feel, you know, a sense of accomplishment when you can kind of like be successful at it.
I was going to say something that I think is super valuable that a lot of people don't do or get prenatal consults, which lots of lactation consultants do them. And I think it's really valuable, even more so than a class, because you can get that individual one-on-one where they can kind of go over those concerns, like about your nipple size or your breast size and your past medical history, because there's certain medical conditions that can impact breastfeeding, or if you had past breast surgery. So it's kind of going over those things, and you can kind of uncover issues that may arise so before they happen. Because when your baby comes, if you're like, oh my gosh, like it can be kind of crazy when your baby first gets there. And so kind of having a plan before, you run into those issues can be very valuable.
Amazing. All right, Sharva, tell us about your first 24 hours with the baby and kind of what happens in that first week at home, because it feels like every single day there's a new journey in that first week.
Definitely. And that definitely is true. It seems like there is something new this child does, something new this little human does every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So one of the biggest concerns that the moms that I see that they have is, how can I tell if I'm making enough milk? Right? Like we were talking about with the different breast size, they were thinking, oh, well, my breasts aren't big enough, so I'm not making enough milk. Or other things that would make a mom think that they're not making enough milk. Maybe the baby seems what they think is hungry, or because the baby may be fussy. But there are definitely ways that you can tell if you're making enough milk. The main one being diaper outputs. Okay, so diaper outputs, you want to have 4 by 4. That's what I always go by. So you want to have those 4 wet diapers by day 4, like 4 a day. Okay, and swallowing. Listen for swallowing. Now, when you come to a breastfeeding consultation, like an in-person consultation, I use a stethoscope. And a lot of moms, that's really reassuring for them. I ask them, hey, do you hear this sound? And they're able to, to hear that when baby's swallowing. And I say, you hear that? And they're like, yes. And they notice that difference. If you hear baby swallowing, baby's getting that milk, okay?
I remember the lactation consultant showing me, like, you can see their chin moving up and down when they're sucking, just that.
Yes.
But then when they swallow, it's like a deeper, slower one. So it's like, I'm like, I was always looking for that deep swallow, that slower, bigger chin movement compared to the sucking. And that was good for reassurance.
And just like you were saying, that jaw movement too. So that rocker motion in the jaw, instead of that piston motion, you want to see that jaw movement. You hear that swallowing, you have those wet diapers, you're making enough milk. Okay. So I just want you guys to be confident in that. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, of course, always contact a breastfeeding specialist. Okay, another question that I get from moms: should I nurse from one side or should I nurse from both sides at each feeding? What do you guys think about that? Like, do you guys think, or have you, if you've already nursed your babies, have you nursed from one side or both sides at each feeding? How do you guys do that? Both is good to alternate.
I always breastfed on both sides with my kids, sometimes more than once.
I was a overproducer, so they told me to do block feeding one side at a time, but I don't think that's for everybody.
Yeah. So, is anybody in the chat with multiples?
Yeah, let us know if you've got multiples or you're already have a baby at home, maybe.
No one? Okay. I was wondering, I wanted to get that perspective from a mom of multiples as well. Okay. But anyway, we're going to move on. Give me 1 second here, you guys. Okay. So how about one side? Did you say, Katie, that you nursed from one side or both sides?
I did both sides. But Jen, she said that she did just one side.
Just one side.
Right. Okay. And for me, I nurse. It's funny, again, this may be different with nursing a toddler and then my newborns, because my toddler, again, toddlers nurse how they want. He literally requests both at the same time. He moves from this one, that one, to this one, to this one. It's the craziest thing. And honestly, he's been day one. I would feed him on one side to empty it out, and then I would move to the other side. And now with my other children, I'll tell you another experience that I've had, or that I've experienced with I experienced this with another mom. This mom, she was an overproducer. So what she would do is she would breastfeed, until she kind of felt like it was empty on this side. And then she moved to this other side. Now her baby, excuse me guys, I got a net here. So her baby was gaining weight and everything pretty good. Again, she was an overproducer, but the way that she did it, again, she did like Katie. She nursed one side and then she nursed the other side. And sometimes she may go back to the other side. And so pretty much during her feedings, that's how she was able to do it. That's what worked for them. And I will say that too as well. Some moms find that nursing from one side helps for feeding. And some moms find that it's best for them to nurse, from both sides. And that's in one feeding.
And one thing with that is that sometimes in the beginning, a mom will have a lot of milk. And so the baby's kind of, they'll get full off one side, but then as their supply regulates, they may need to start offering both sides. So it's really important to just, watch for those signs of wellness that you talked about, the diapers and the weight gain, to make sure, that all of a sudden your supply hasn't regulated and now they need both sides, but they're used to just one side.
So yeah, and I think over time, right, your breasts in the early days when your milk is first coming in, you feel really engorged all the time. And then eventually, as your supply regulates, it's a little bit harder to intuitively know, like, have you emptied? So you have to kind of learn your baby's cues about when they're satisfied. So I think the answer to should I nurse from one side or both at each feeding is it depends. And as a mama yourself, like, you're going to have to figure out your body and your baby and how they're working together. But it's all about supply and demand. And the more the baby eats, the more milk you're going to make. And that's just going to keep happening throughout your breastfeeding journey.
Yeah. I know with my kids, it's like, sometimes I would nurse like on both sides and then they'd be like, I want more. So I'm like, okay, because I think sometimes you think you can only do 2 times, but it's like, I'm like, you can put them back on. Like, obviously you need to make sure that they're actually getting milk. They're not like not getting anything, but it's like, put them on as much as you want. Because the more the baby is at the breast, your milk is being produced as they nurse.
Exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
All right, okay. Sharva, how can I help my baby get a deep latch? I know I struggled a lot in the early days with some pain while I was trying to breastfeed because the baby had a shallow latch.
Gotcha.
And, I sometimes thought that she was lazy. but I'm like, where'd she get this lazy latch? But she was just a sleepy little newborn baby. So how can you encourage your baby to get a deep latch?
Gotcha. So first of all, when you're holding baby, you don't want to hold baby to where they're not able to pull their head back like this just a little bit. You want to hold them just below so they're able to do their head a little bit like this, because what's going to happen when they do this, and what you're looking for, is a wide gate. So baby's going to open that mouth up. Like, baby's going to open that mouth up really wide. You want baby to have a very wide gate. And then that's when baby's tongue is going to be down and you're going to bring the baby towards you. Okay. So in order to get that deep latch, because what's going to happen pretty much is like Jennifer was saying, like that pain, a lot of time that's where that pain comes from, is when baby doesn't have enough of the breast in their mouth. I had a client that actually happened with, and her nipples were pretty raw and they were sore simply because of that. And we were able to adjust baby's latch. We were able to make sure that she knew to, because again, I've seen it a lot of times where we're maybe holding baby, on the back of their head because we want to support their head, but we also want to give baby enough room to where they're able to rear their head back enough and open up very wide. Again, we don't want like a very shallow, like we don't want this right here. We don't want this right here. It'd be awesome if we can get like that, so that we can get enough of that breast in baby's mouth, again, as to make sure that they are getting enough milk, and also to avoid that pain that comes along with that. And something else that you want to do is you're going to make sure the baby is, you want to make sure that baby's tongue is down before you bring baby towards you, and make sure that the lips are outward. Like, you don't want to, you know how sometimes if you're putting maybe a push pop or something in your mouth and your lips kind of go in like this, we want baby's lips to be out like this, like a little duck, like duck lips. That's what we kind of want it to be like around the breast. And you want all your nipple in baby's mouth, as much of your nipple in baby's mouth as you can. I
remember somebody giving me the tip that you want to point your nipple towards the baby's nose to encourage them to get that wide open latch that you were saying, and then make sure that your nipple is kind of hitting them at the roof of their mouth. And that like, I mean, I don't know if this is the technical terminology, you guys are the experts, but I remember thinking that was a helpful tip, that I was constantly trying to point my nipple at the baby's nose to get her to open wider, to get that deeper latch.
Right. And you want to make sure that baby's also turned towards you. Like sometimes you may want hold baby like this, and where baby is just laying, like baby's back is on your arm. You want baby to really be turned towards you. And you want kind of like a straight line. The baby's body is going to be in a straight line as baby is turned towards you. So
yeah, you don't want your baby with like their head turned to the side, their body's twisted the other direction.
That can be really painful.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Did we lose your video? Okay, you're back.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
All right. Sharva, if my newborn is nursing all the time, is that normal? And if they are sleeping, do I need to wake them up to eat?
So if newborn is nursing all the time, that is normal. So yes, that is normal. Again, I've had clients whose babies, again, that was one of the things they thought, well, I'm not producing enough milk. They're producing enough milk. Baby, baby wants to latch as baby grows. Baby may be going through a growth spurt. That happens. That's another reason, like when that increases. And so there are some times where baby may seem like maybe baby's not interested, right? But then again, like we're talking about here, is it normal for baby to nurse all the time? That is also normal. And
yeah, the recommendation, right, is every 2 to 3 hours in those early days. But I remember by day 7, I was like a total mess. And I realized I was using the Haka, which is, it's not an actual like electric breast pump, and it's not a manual one that you have to squeeze it with your hand. It like is just a suction-based thing that you can put on the other side when you're nursing. And I would catch a little bit of extra milk that way. And that let me get to 4 hours of sleep for me on day 7. And that was like a game changer. I was like, oh my God, I'm a new person. I can actually function on 4 hours of sleep, and let my husband take over one of those feeds with a bottle just to like, give me some rest.
Exactly. And that's what I love to hear. Mama got some rest. I love to hear those words. That's very important. Like we were talking about earlier with mental health, very important. Okay. And breastfeed on demand or wake baby every 3 hours until back to birth weight. So with that being said, I always say, first of all, mom, you're doing a good job. Okay. And it's like Jennifer said, sometimes you do what you have to do. You have to get some sleep. You have to get some sleep in order to function, right? So breastfeed on demand or wake baby every 3 hours until back to birth weight. If your baby is gaining weight just fine, if your pediatrician isn't giving that instruction, if your pediatrician doesn't have any issues with baby's weight and isn't saying, hey, you have to do this every 2 hours, and again, baby is gaining weight, well, get that rest, mama, because that's very important.
I mean, for the expecting mamas, you might not actually know that the baby does lose up to 10% of their birth weight right after they're born, because they start pooping out all of that goo they were eating inside the womb, and then they're just, trying to regain their birth weight in those early days. And so, that's kind of your first goal as a breastfeeding mama, is to help them get back to their birth weight, and make sure that they're having those diapers every single day. So last question, Sharva, before we pass it to Katie. Any tips on what supplies you want to make sure you've got ready at home when you get back from the hospital?
Definitely. So if you're going to be pumping, you're definitely going to need to have your pump at home. There are manual pumps, there are electric pumps. It's like Jennifer was talking about, that Haka. That is a great tool to use also. Even if you're not planning to pump, if you don't want to waste your milk, if you want to be nursing on one side and have that Haka on the other, I highly recommend that as well. And the supplies, of course, to go along with your pump, you want to have extra parts, you want to have your tubing, you want to have the proper size flanges. That's very important that you guys have the proper size flanges. And you also want to have any other additional parts. Again, different pumps have different parts to them, but the tubing is one of those things that I tell every mom to try to keep extra of. And with those flanges, also keep extra of those. Keep some replacement parts by leaking pads, so the nipple shields.
I'm like, I've got my flange right here since I was just pumping. But this is what a flange is. This is the part of the pump that goes onto your breast. and they have different sizes, 21 millimeters, 24, 27. I've seen a tool on Willow, which is a breast pump company, where you can actually like use your iPhone to measure your nipple size and figure out what size flange they recommend for you, which I tried out and it was pretty helpful. So if you aren't sure what flange size to get, I think standard, most of them come with 24 millimeters, but you can measure your nipples in advance and make sure you've got that flange size that's going to give you the most comfort when you're pumping.
It makes a huge difference too. I was working with a mama who had been using a 27 millimeter for 9 months, and she was in pain that whole time. And I just did a consult with her, and she was actually more a 21 millimeter with elastic nipples. So and it could be different per side too. So having that right size flange can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
All
and
right.
you also want to have that leaking pads. Don't forget those things. You know, have you ever seen a mom that it may look like she's maybe, or maybe water or something is on her shirt? You're going to want to have those as well. And your Boppy pillow bras. And if you're not wanting to breastfeed, or if you're unsure, or if you just want to have some on hand, you could also have formula as well.
I just want to add a little bit about the leaking pads for the people who haven't nursed before. So there's this thing that happens when you're nursing, and the first minute or two, the baby might be sucking, but they're not getting a whole lot of milk yet because they're signaling to your body that they want the milk to be released. So it's called the Letdown. There's a great show on Netflix, I believe, called The Letdown, which is, it's a breastfeeding joke, but it's basically when the hormones in your body release that milk, and like the mammary glands are letting it out, and then you'll notice the baby starts to drink a lot more milk suddenly. And what I would notice is when you let down, if the baby's only nursing on one side, the other side is also letting milk down. And that's what can start to leak on your shirt. And it's wild in those first few days postpartum. I could even just think to myself, is it time for the baby to eat? And like milk would start coming. like when you hear people who are like, oh my God, like something just triggered me. I saw a picture of a baby. I heard a baby cry and I let down and I started leaking milk. That is that process. And so over time, some people tend to be more leakers, and some people like me, actually over time, I'm more of a clogger. Like I tend to get clogs in my ducts. And so there's supplements you can take and things to help with that. But in those early days, I was definitely using these little disposable, and they also have reusable leak pads that you can put inside your bra so that you don't have breast milk all over everything. Katie, you look like you want to add something.
Oh, no.
Oh, you muted yourself.
I was just kind of, no, I don't have anything to add right now. But no, it's definitely a big, like, it's so funny because with my first two, I leaked all the time, but with my third, I didn't leak at all, but I had probably the best supply I did at the time. And I think it's just because I just nursed him constantly. When you have 3 kids at that point, it's like, you're crying, let's just nurse you. So it was like, but with my other kids, it's like, I leaked until like 6 months with both of them. And it was like, I'd just be standing in the hall and all of a sudden my shirt would be wet. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So it is normal. And it's normal not to leak too. I think some people were like, they get really worried about that. They're like, I'm not leaking, what's going on? And you know, you have to go back to, is your baby gaining weight? Are they having enough diapers? Are you feeding them on demand? Because everyone's different.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you, Sharva. We're going to move on to established breastfeeding. So once you're home from the hospital and you've kind of got a good routine going, Katie, let us know, like, when can you introduce a pacifier? And
yeah, no, I love talking about established breastfeeding just because I feel like, you know, as little support as there is for, you know, brand new breastfeeding moms, I feel like it just gets less and less as the older your baby gets. So having kind of some different resources for, you know, when you run into those issues is important. So the pacifier thing, technically you should wait until breastfeeding is well established, where, you know, you're not having any issues, your baby's nursing well, you know, they're latching without having issues, they're gaining weight, just because we don't want to have you give the pacifier, you know, instead of feeding them. With that said, I think that a pacifier can be helpful in those early days if you need one. With all my kids, I have used them just because I'm like, I need a break and they won't nurse and I just want to give them a pacifier. And sometimes I call it a reset tool, where sometimes when your baby is breastfeeding and, you know, or they don't want to latch and they're freaking out and you're getting frustrated, sometimes you can give them a pacifier and it helps them reset, you know, themselves and make things a little bit less stressful. Because I think it's really important to make the breast a happy place. And if both of you are getting super, super frustrated and stressed out, it's not, and that can make breastfeeding harder. So I think a pacifier can be helpful.
Well, and isn't there, I feel like there was a new study that came out sometime between my first daughter being born and my second daughter being born, that pacifiers were actually found to reduce the risk of SIDS.
Yep.
Because it's helping keep the baby's airway open at night. So my second time, when I delivered earlier this year, the nurses in the hospital actually were encouraging the pacifiers earlier than they used to. And they said, you know, pacifiers had a bad rap, but now they're encouraging use of the pacifier. Because I know, like you said, if the baby is suckling at the nipple just for comfort, sometimes I remember my lactation consultant called it non-nutritive sucking. Like they just like that motion of moving their mouth back and forth, but they're not getting any milk and they're not hungry. Like that's a great time to put the pacifier in and save yourself the agony of just having the baby suck all the time when they're not even eating.
For sure. And I think that it's valuable for so many different reasons. And sometimes it can help a baby that's struggling to suckle or latch. And I think that the important thing is to always put the baby to the breast first. That's what I always say is, you know, put the baby to the breast first. But sometimes you can't give them that pacifier, because the problem we run into and why they recommend waiting for longer times to introduce a pacifier is that is what you turn to instead. So sometimes we say, oh, the baby's using me as a pacifier, but a pacifier is a substitute for the breast, not the other way around. And so it's okay for them to suckle at the breast if they're not actively eating all the time, but it's okay to want a break too, because it is exhausting if you're nursing constantly. So I would say, you know, make sure that if they're not actively nursing and you're kind of like, okay, I need to be done for now, you know, a pacifier can be good, just to make sure that you're not like, oh, I need to wait till I need to make sure the baby's not eating for until it's been 3 hours. So they just have to have the pacifier until then, because sometimes waiting till 3 hours, some babies need to eat more frequently than that. So I think it's a tool and I think it's great. And I'll probably, some people would probably come after me saying, you told people to use a pacifier before 4 weeks, but I'm realistic, and I have 3 kids and we've used pacifiers since day one.
Well, and when you're talking about people, when babies are eating more often than every 2 or 3 hours, I think that's called cluster feeding. And my babies always did that in the early evenings. We called it the witching hour, where they're just fussy around bedtime. What are any tips or tricks around cluster feeding, Katie?
Cluster feeding is it's a hard thing to encounter, because all of a sudden your baby wants to nurse constantly and you're like, are they getting enough? Even with my last baby, he was cluster feeding and I was like, oh my gosh, is he not getting enough milk? Is he not in? But I did a weighted feed because I had a scale at home and he was, but he just wanted to keep nursing. So in those situations, I say it's okay to keep putting them back to the breast. Obviously, if there's no period where they are calm, then that might be a sign that something else is going on, because we don't want a baby to be cluster feeding and not getting any milk. But I always just say, get in a comfortable chair, get on your couch and, turn on a show and just let them nurse. It often happens more at night, but it can happen at any point, and it can actually happen at any point during your breastfeeding journey. And that's why I'm not someone to say your baby needs to eat every 3 hours, because it can change, and that scares people. And they're like, are they, they have to. With my first, I thought he could only eat every 3 hours because that's what they told me. And so I had a very unhappy baby. And sometimes I think he would have cried a lot less if I had just, nursed him. And, with my second, he nursed every hour, like he wasn't gaining weight. So we switched him to nursing every hour and a half. And he did that, and that he started gaining weight with that. So, and he had a tongue tie. So there was some different things going on, but it's just, you have to do what works for your baby and for you and kind of experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. So once your baby is 4 to 6 months old, your pediatrician might suggest that you start to introduce solids. And there's some milestones the baby has to hit before your pediatrician will recommend it. But how does introducing solids impact breastfeeding?
Yeah, so this is a very common question. People really get worried about introducing solids because they don't know how it's going to impact breastfeeding, or all of a sudden their baby doesn't want to breastfeed because they're getting so much solids. The AAP and the World Health Organization do recommend 6 months at this point. That's kind of a standard now. There's been different ones over the years, but 6 months plus those signs of readiness is generally the best thing. Just because we want them to get, breast milk or formula for the first 6 months, their nutrition from that. And at 6 months, you can start introducing it. But at that point, you don't need to be doing, 2 or 3 meals. Like I have moms that are like, my baby just turned 6 months and I'm trying to feed him 3 meals a day and 2 snacks. And that is way too much. Between 6 and 9 months, we're looking for, 1 to 2 meals or even just exposures. And so you want to make sure that you are offering milk first, because that should be their primary source of nutrition throughout the whole first year. Even by 1, it's usually around 70% of their nutrition is still coming from breast milk. So I always say, take a deep breath and try not to stress about it and follow your baby's cues. So always offer them breast milk first. But if when you're eating, sitting down to eat, put them on the table, and you can give, or, in their high chair, obviously properly secured. You can have them eat, little spoons at a time. If they're interested, that's great. If they're not interested, then that's great too. And if you start to notice, they're eating tons of solids and they're not wanting to breastfeed, it's okay to back off a little bit, because I think sometimes we worry, oh, they need to have all of those solids. And, there's the food before 1 is just for fun, which I don't promote that, just because food is important before a year, just to introduce them to different flavors and textures and those different gross motor skills, gross and fine motor skills. But it doesn't have to be, they have to be eating like a king all day long, because it's okay. And it should be the wide variety, or the wide portion of their food should be breast milk. So always offer breast milk first, and then kind of follow their cues.
Yeah, and I would just add, like I said, my baby is 7 months old, so I just went through the solids introductions. And with both of my daughters, I did notice that I had a little dip in my milk supply after we started introducing solids, because the baby wasn't as hungry. She was getting a little bit more nutrition from the solids, and I didn't need as much milk. So it's like a very slow process, I think, over that 6 months until they're 1, when they're really kind of getting more and more nutrition from their food. And for me, when my supply started to drop, both times, that's when my period returned. So I know there's like a lot of variability in when people get their period back postpartum. And for me, it was both times right after I introduced solids, and my supply started to dip a little bit. So I don't know if that's a direct correlation, but that's my hypothesis.
No, it is. I notice a lot of people have their menstrual cycle come back between 6 and 9 months. And I do think often it is because they're getting more, they're starting to get more solids. And I think, I don't know, because I always have people ask me for, like, can I have a schedule? And I'm like, I really think just kind of going with the flow is really the most beneficial thing you can do. And generally we see the biggest decrease in the amount of milk they're getting around 9 to 10 months. So it goes from an average of 24 to 30 to about 17 ounces in 24 hours. And obviously, if you're breastfeeding just directly from the breast, you're not going to know how much they're getting. But I think following their cues, and if they're interested, that's great. If they're not super interested someday, that's okay too. But a lot of people do see a dip in supply around that time.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about formula. When should people consider introducing formula? How do they do it, and why should they do it?
Yeah. So formula, obviously, I think people often think, breastfeeding versus formula, like it's just like this big battle, but formula is a tool. It's, I don't want to say medication, but it's a tool for and it can be part of breastfeeding. It doesn't have to be. A lot of people are able to breastfeed just fine without giving formula, but sometimes you may need to give formula if your supply is low, and your baby's just not getting enough to eat, or you have low milk supply because of, some underlying health conditions, or you just want to do both. Some people just want to combo feed, and that is totally fine. But we usually recommend, for supplementing, we say to use mom's milk if there's any available, donor milk, and then formula, but really it's up to you. So it does, like, breastfeeding isn't all or nothing. It's like, some people think, oh, if I, how much breast milk is beneficial. And I truly believe every drop is beneficial. So even if you give, 24 ounces of formula and 2 ounces of breast milk, that's still okay. And that's how your journey is going to go. And you can give formula, like in the first couple of days after giving birth. Some people think, oh, I need to just give them formula to just get them through until my milk comes in. But like Sharva said earlier, you have milk. Colostrum is milk. It's called your first milk. And that is going to give your baby, in most situations, enough of the nutrition that they need for those first few days.
I feel like it's extra stressful right now, because with COVID, people are being dismissed from the hospital so much earlier before their milk supply has even come in. And so they're at home alone, isolated, and not really sure what to do. And so I feel like there are a lot of people who are like feeling like they don't have enough milk in those early days. So, I think this is really encouraging to just give more information around that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people do worry about that because they don't think that they have enough milk, or they think that they should be giving, big bottles of milk in the beginning. And that's really not necessary. But if a baby is not, if they've lost above that 10% of, weight, or if they are having blood sugar issues in the beginning, or you're not producing milk, your baby's just not having enough diapers, sometimes formula can be used to help get you through that. You can also use donor milk, or you can use your own expressed milk, but sometimes it can just get you through a hump. And I think that's one thing, is that, some people think, oh, if I gave formula, then that's the end, their gut's ruined, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think, we always hear things like that, like the virgin gut and just different things like that. But I think sometimes a little bit of formula in some situations, working with a lactation consultant to help guide you through that, can help prolong the breastfeeding relationship. And I think it can be a tool in that situation. I think that you just have to be realistic about it, especially if some people do have true low milk supply, where, no matter how much they put their baby to the breast, they're not going to get enough milk. And that could be a really, difficult and stressful situation to go through. But formula can be used in addition to breastfeeding, and you can still have a very positive relationship in that situation. And I think a lot of it just comes down to working with a professional, kind of defining your goals and seeing, like, what is important to me? What do I want to accomplish? And then going from there. And sometimes, some people just want to give both, and that's okay too, because they're like, I don't want to pump, but I can't, nurse all day long, or things like that. So formula is something they want to give. And I think that, it's just something you have to decide and not feel guilty about it. Own your choice, and be informed about it. That's my big thing, is helping parents make informed choices so that they can feel confident and not feel like, oh, I failed, I did, or having to, justify what they did. Because I think that making an informed decision really helps that alleviate those feelings of guilt.
Totally. So how do moms maintain their milk supply as the baby starts to sleep longer, or mom is returning to work and isn't necessarily with the baby all day? Tell us a little bit more about how supply and demand works.
Yeah. So obviously, the more that you move milk, the more milk you make. And then if you start having longer periods of time where you're not nursing, your body starts to think, oh, well, I don't need to have as much available milk. Maybe we're going to put the stops on the milk making machine. So I get this question almost every day, that a baby's sleeping longer at night. They're like, do I need to get up and pump? Can I sleep? And because when your baby's sleeping, 6 hours at a time, I never have my babies do that, but I've heard it happen. So I know that sometimes it can be stressful, because you're like, I don't want to lose my milk supply. And it is a delicate situation. I usually say, if it's about 5 hours and it's been kind of more of a natural progression where they started sleeping through the night, if you're sleep training, that can kind of, especially really early on, that can kind of affect things more. But if they're naturally sleeping through the night and your body's just kind of going along with their routine and what you're doing and what they're doing, I say generally just go with that. But if they're starting to sleep like 12 hours at night, I would definitely pump probably before you go to bed, just to see, how things go. Sometimes getting up in the middle of the night. There's a lactation consultant that I love, and she says that she recommends, if your baby's sleeping longer periods at night, drink 16 ounces of water right before you go to bed. And then when you wake up naturally, then that's when you should pump. Like when you wake up to go to the bathroom, then you should pump.
Really
then.
Smart. I feel like I'm constantly waking up like, oh my gosh, why isn't the baby waking up? I've got to get this milk out.
Yeah. And I thought it was fantastic advice. And I think that doesn't have to go on forever, but I do think it's helpful to kind of start out by pumping, if your baby's sleeping for longer periods of time, and then you can slowly wean away from it to see how your body adjusts. Like my son, he's 2, and sometimes he'll nurse at nap time, and then sometimes he only nurses once in the middle of the night, but there's always milk for him. He always is able to get milk out. And so I think that doesn't always happen for people. And I definitely think, the more that you nurse and the more demand there is, the more milk you're going to make. But also, it's okay to go with kind of the natural progression of things. Like you don't have to like be so rigid, like we have to do this, 24/7. And some people are more sensitive to decreases in stimulation. Like some people do need to pump more, or sometimes just for your own comfort. You're like, I'm so uncomfortable. You don't want to get clogged. You don't want to get mastitis. And that's where I always say, don't do like, go slowly and adjust as needed.
That's great. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, Katie. So let's just hit these last two bullets pretty fast, and we can pass it back to Sharva. So talk a little bit about the freezer stash that everybody talks about, and pumping to return to work.
Yeah. So freezer stashes are one of those things that social media has, brought to the limelight for most parents. That, they see the big freezers full of breast milk, and they think, so many moms see that and think, oh, I have to have a freezer full of breast milk. And that's honestly not true. You don't need a freezer stash of breast milk. If you are going back to work, I usually recommend starting to get enough to go back to work a couple weeks before you go back. So if you're going back at 6 weeks, you could start at 3 to 4 weeks. If you're going back at 12 weeks, you have a little bit longer. But what the first goal is to get enough for the first day back, plus a 2 to 3 day freezer stash or an emergency supply, because ideally you'll be pumping every day for what your baby needs. And then you can have that emergency stash. And that's going to be about 1 to 1.5 ounces per hour you're away that you want to have. So I say, go for, you can do that. You can use the Haka. A lot of moms do get a good amount of milk in the freezer from the Haka. I wouldn't just only feed that, but it can be helpful. And one thing with the Haka is that it can sometimes, there are moms that get oversupplies from a Haka because it still is a pump. There's still stimulation there. So if you're like, I'm so engorged all the time and you're using the Haka a lot, it could be due to that. But
that happened to me, and my lactation consultant was like, stop using the Haka.
Yeah, it's such a great tool, but a lot of people don't realize that it does stimulate the breast. So sometimes it does help you. It does make you produce more. But then pumping, like you can start, we usually say around 4 weeks to let your body regulate and get used to, your baby, and not, inducing a huge oversupply. But there's always situations where maybe you may need to pump before that. Or if you're going back to work really early, you may need to start pumping earlier.
All right, great. And so then as your breastfeeding journey starts to come to an end, like how do you encourage moms to think about when they're going to wean and how to wean?
So I always tell them that the weaning process, obviously, when you start to introduce solids, that technically begins the weaning process. But the active weaning process, I say, don't start that until your baby does turn 12 months, because they should be having breast milk. You shouldn't be introducing cow's milk before 12 months in general, or for the most part. So it starts at 12 months, and some moms, they want to be done right away. And there's ways you can do that, where you can kind of drop a feed every couple of days, see how your body does, and kind of do a little bit more of a fast approach. But then other people are like, well, I'm okay with them nursing more. Is it okay to keep breastfeeding? And it is like the World Health Organization recommends for 2 years or more. The AAP recommends for at least a year, and then for as long as both mom and baby want to. So you just kind of have to, it's a personal choice. You have to decide, what is going to work for my family and for my situation. Some people just want to be done. And and sometimes that happens before a year. And if you want to wean before a year, you do need to transition to an alternative milk, such as formula or donor milk. But it's just it's a very personal decision. And
yeah, I was just going to say, for me, I nursed my first daughter for 16 months, but it was a very gradual process of weaning from 12 to 16 months. Because at 12 months, I was like, I am not getting up at 5 a.m. anymore. I am sleep training, that 5 a.m. feeding out. I'm only breastfeeding before and after work, and before bed. But one thing that I feel like not enough people talk about, we talk a lot about postpartum anxiety and depression in the early days, right after you have your baby, and just like your hormones are going crazy, right after giving birth. I actually experienced like a hormonal depression during the weaning process, because every time you nurse your baby, you're getting a shot of this like hormone called oxytocin. And it's like a happy hormone. It's what makes you like to nurse your baby and have that bonding moment. And so as you nurse less and less, you get less and less of that happy hormone. And so I think just be really aware of that and be cognizant, knowing that the weaning process can lead to a hormonal depletion. And if you need to talk to your doctor about it, to consider medication or talk therapy or something else to help you get through that process. It's totally normal to experience weaning related hormonal depression, not just in those initial postpartum days.
Yep. A lot of people encounter that and they don't realize, they're like, what is going on? And it is a very normal thing that's just not talked about very much. And so it's like, and I do find that the slower you wean, the less like if more drastic weaning does tend to, or like more drastic stops, like if you're like go from nursing 24, like 4 times or 4 to 6 times a day to not at all, it's generally a lot more intense, but it can happen at any point. And so can things like clogged ducts and discomfort. But a lot of it just depends on how fast you go when you're weaning.
Totally. Oops, I was already on Sharva's slide here. So overcoming breastfeeding challenges. Sharva, the first one I want to answer is just from Ankita. She said that her baby latches and sucks a little and then moves backwards and unlatches. And sometimes like does that a couple times and cries with irritation. I have a hypothesis about what's going on for her, but I would love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the letdown may be a little too, maybe a little strong for baby. So I'm thinking maybe sit baby up a little. See if that makes a difference. Like if you sit baby up, I don't know what position you may have baby in, but maybe try sitting baby up, because it may be that letdown, that baby may be getting a little too much milk at one time. So try sitting baby up, try a different position where you're holding baby up like this is baby's head, and try feeding like that. Because that's what,
I was going to say, I think that's a good one. My baby sometimes would choke on the letdown, which was like terrifying for me as a new mother. Like that my letdown was so strong that the baby was like coughing. But yeah. I noticed my baby pulling off and unlatching in the witching hours right before bedtime. Like at the end of the day is when my supply tends to be lowest. I think that's pretty common. And the baby is used to getting that fast flow, fast let down early in the morning. And then in the evening when the milk is like slower and there's less milk there, she's just like angry. She's like frustrated. She's like popping off, like going, where's that fast milk? So she's impatient almost. Katie, any other things you think it might be?
That was my initial thought, was the fast letdown. A lot of times when we see baby latching and unlatching, it's because of either a fast letdown or a slow letdown. Because sometimes if they're like, this milk isn't coming fast enough, they will unlatch. But I think a lot of times it's probably a fast letdown. She sent me some direct messages. Okay. I don't know if you saw those, but she said, to what age do baby cluster feeds? And I think it's a lot more in the beginning, but then it kind of slows down. But it can happen at any point, during growth spurts. So I think that's something a lot of people are like, they're like, why is my baby all of a sudden nursing constantly at 4 months? And it's probably because a cluster feeding is a way to tell your body to make more milk.
Yep. All right. Sharva, I know a lot of moms are really nervous about introducing a bottle to the baby. Like, any tips if the baby won't take the bottle? How and when should you introduce a bottle? Like, give us, I know we're almost out of time, so like your fast tips on introducing the bottle.
Definitely. Okay, so of course there are different types of bottles. Of course, we've all heard different types of things about different bottles. So I would say I always recommend moms getting maybe different types of bottles, see which one baby takes. My baby, they love the Tommy Tippy bottles. Most of them did. I last, and he completely refused the bottle. Now I've had that just happens. They will not. Again, I left the bottle with my mom. I went to a board meeting, and come back, and he didn't need anything. He did not want that bottle. Now, something about that. So what you may want to try to do is the opposite of what I did, which is try this before you want to leave them somewhere. Definitely try the bottle, see what bottle that baby may like. Because again, baby may not want a bottle. And something that my mom was able to do was to take a spoon, because babies can either have a spoon, syringe. Let's see, babies can also drink from, some babies can even drink from like a cup. So that's other ways, but pretty much you want to try to find a way that baby will drink while you're gone, in case you have to be away for any reason. So, but try that before, try that a while.
For me, we had successfully introduced the bottle when the baby was a week old, just so that I could get that 4 hours of sleep and have my husband do that one feeding at night. But then, because I was on maternity leave, I was just nursing the baby around the clock. And all of a sudden at 4 months, when I was ready to go back to work, the baby hadn't had a bottle in a couple of months, and she forgot. She was not interested. So that was a stressful couple of days for us, trying to reteach her to take that bottle. But I know that it's usually recommended to have a slow flow on the nipple, so baby doesn't get too excited about the bottle and not want to nurse anymore. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so definitely you want to have that slow flow nipple. And something that'll be said between the different brands, that slow flow may be a lot slower or may faster than the other ones. So again, you just want to see which one works best for your baby. Let's, again, because you don't want to get this nipple, it says slow flow. and then it goes a
Or
lot.
sometimes they're called preemie nipples.
Yeah. And again, there's some that are shaped like the breast. Of course, there's those, what I would call the regular bottle nipples. There are different types of nipples. So get the slow flow. First of all, get that slow flow nipple. You don't want to get something like one of those. They're different sizes. I think some of them come in numbers like 1, 2, 3. Typically it goes from slow to, to faster flow. But just check that, make sure that baby, that it's not too slow or too fast for baby. Make sure, you just want to customize it for baby.
Totally. Okay, last question, and then we'll let everybody go. How can you get rid of clogged ducts, and how do you know if you have mastitis? Because I know these can be two really painful conditions that moms might experience during their breastfeeding journey.
Right. So mastitis is a serious thing. So, like you have redness on your breast, and if you have a fever, and that's something that you want to get taken care of immediately, please visit or please contact your doctor when that happens. Now, engorgement, also a serious thing. This can be a painful thing. Recommendations include getting into a warm shower and just letting those breasts just literally just hang and just let that warm water run over them. Or the one that I found that works the best with my moms is if they take a like a tub of warm water and they lean over that and they put their breast into that, and that just pretty much just starts that flow, and that milk just starts flowing out of there. And what you can do to help that is to like massage your breast while you're doing that, and that'll help with those clogged ducts. And to avoid
With my
that,
first baby, I use my electric toothbrush to help massage it, and now there's a couple of products on the market that are actually called lactation massagers that you can use to like get in there on your clogged duct and help vibrate the clog loose.
And those are so helpful. And I definitely recommend that as well. But that heat, that definitely gets everything going, and that massage in combo with that massage. But to avoid it completely, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your bras fit well. You want to make sure they're not too tight, that you're nursing or pumping, getting that milk moving, keeping it moving. And so those are the best tips that I can give you guys as far as ensuring that it doesn't happen. And if it does, what to do if it does happen.
Absolutely. And the last thing I would add, because like I said, I'm prone to clogged ducts, is I take a supplement called sunflower lecithin. And I found that really helps me just like get my milk flowing a bit more smoothly.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, unfortunately we are out of time today, which is so sad because Sharva and Katie are just like a fountain of knowledge here. But I know that all three of us want to support you mamas as you are going on your breastfeeding journey, as you're preparing to welcome your babies, or you've already got your baby at home and you're trying to navigate those challenging days. Please feel free to reach out to any of us directly or through Tot Squad. You can get in touch with Katie and Sharva on our site as well. And we will be announcing the winners of the Boppy Pillow giveaway very soon. Thank you so much to Boppy for helping share this information out to mamas everywhere. I hope everybody has a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye, ladies. Thank you.
Bye-bye.